Hello, my name is Dijana Granov. I'm an artist from Chicago, and my focus is mainly in fashion illustration. I never made a decision on whether I should be an artist or not. I always kind of knew it, and I ended up at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and I got a degree from there in fashion design and fashion illustration. In addition to my illustration work that I currently do, I decided to go back to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and teach a couple classes. So I teach fashion illustration, and some fashion design courses. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the Prismacolor Premier Brush Fine Art Markers. They are a new product from Prismacolor. They come in 152 colors, just like the chisel markers, and they use the same inks for these markers. They just offer you a little bit more versatility in the tip. So now I'm going to show you how these markers work in my illustration and how I like to use them. I've started my illustration already. It's kind of a fashion illustration. I've already laid down some of my skin tones and I'm going to go into shadow. So with the skin tone, I usually start with just a base color, the lightest color that you see in your reference or in the model that you're using, and then I like to go into my shadows. So my first skin tone was brick beige, and I'm actually going to move into cinnamon toast or light walnut, and I like to build up those colors and blend them really well, and that's something that this alcohol ink actually allows you to do. So I'm just going to go into light walnut and establish my shadows a little bit further into the skin. So when I'm working in the face of a person, I usually like to use the fine tip just for some of the details. And it's the same fine tip that you'll find in the chisel marker. So it's kind of a nice stability feature in there. And then once I establish those shadows, I'm just going to go in with a little bit of warmth. And I usually like to use light peach for that. Just gives a little bit of life to the person. And then the next step for me is always blending with that base color that I laid down first. And I like to usually work from light to dark with my markers, so that's why I've started with the skin tone here first. And then I'm going to move into hair and into the garment itself, depending on which one is lighter. So with this drawing, I'll just work from top to bottom, and I'll give her nice brown hair. I always have an extra piece of paper to test out my markers on the side to make sure that I know how much I can push that marker. So what's nice about the brush tip marker, especially when it comes to textures like hair and fur, is that as you lift it off, the marker becomes lighter. It also gives you that nice smooth texture of strands of hair. So it's very easy to create highlights and reflection. They also give you the possibility of adding direction to an object or to a garment. They naturally add drape. And I think that most people think that you can't achieve very realistic results with markers, but by layering them and having an ink that becomes more saturated as you layer, you can actually achieve a lot of depth in your drawings. So right here I'm just layering two different types of brown and reducing my reflection in the hair to where it looks a lot more natural. And then I can always use a clear blender marker, which is just a clear marker, to blend any edges that I'm not too happy with, if they're a little bit too sharp. And at this point I can just move down to the rest of my drawing, to the rest of the garment. So same as with the skin and anything else, I will always lay down a base tone and then go over it with a shadow that's just a darker version of the same color. Sometimes the same color will layer darker as well, so that will cut down on the number of colors that you need for that specific drawing. So if I wanted to leave this as a looser drawing, just indicating the general color of the garment, then I could leave it the way it is, because I'm already establishing my light and shadow. And then I might use my colorless blender or a lighter color to just blend slightly into the light. And that softens up the garment a little bit. But if I wanted to add some more shadow in there, and if I wanted to add a little bit more depth to it, this is where I can go that shade darker. And then as a final touch in a lot of my drawings, I actually like to add a little bit of gray to neutralize the shadows, because they do become more gray and void of color, and that adds even further depth. So right now I'm just using a cool gray. You can use a warm gray as well if you're working on a slightly warmer drawing, but either one will serve the same purpose. So I'm using that fine tip of the marker to add a little bit of texture to certain parts of this garment and even pattern. And in the belt I can create a shiny texture just by using my gray markers and that blue if I want it to be a blue color. And this is where the layering comes in, because I do like to build up my textures. So now I'm going a little bit darker with my grays, and that neutralizes some of the color in the blue, and it really builds up the material. And then for blending, you can definitely use that lighter gray again. And then for her tights, I'm just going to make them a metallic gray. So with that, I will isolate my reflections, the highlights in there, and use a medium gray tone to go somewhere in between. After my mid-tone, I like to really go into the darker areas of this and start creating my reflections in there. And with reflection, it's always important to break it up a bit with very deep shadows so that any kind of highlights that need to stand out will stand out even more. So now I'm going somewhere in between all of these tones and blending. And the brush tip lifts off beautifully, so I don't even have to blend it that much. And I don't have to use as many markers. So those are my shiny pants that she's wearing. And I'll do the same effect on her bracelet. And at this point, I like to just finalize my drawing by fine-tuning some things in it. So deepening the shadow in the hair, for instance, or adding a little bit of that gray just to tone things down. And the fine tip comes in handy here as well, because I can really focus on the fine details in the drawing. So just a couple final touches. I still like to evaluate my drawing and see if it needs a little bit of warmth anywhere. And I can do that by adding a little bit of pink in certain areas. And then the last thing that I like to do on all of my drawings is finish them with a brush tip pen. It helps add a little bit of weight to the drawing. And it's also nice because if I want the line to be a little bit heavier towards the bottom of the drawing, I can press down on the pen and it gives me that. And then if I want to fine-tune some of the finer details in her face or anywhere else in the drawing, I can do that by being just a little bit more careful with the pen. And she does need some lips. So again, that fine tip of the marker. And that pretty much does it. And there you have it. Thank you for watching. If you would like more information on Prismacolor Premier Brush Fine Art Markers, you can visit prismacolor.com.